Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, everyone. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day, a wonderful week, and a wonderful start to May. Today, I am here to talk about mental health. Specifically, I'll be focusing on depression. Um, so, the information that I'm going to share, it may be something that resonates with you and either your past or current experience, or it could also resonate with a loved one, a colleague, someone that is really important to you. And I'm hoping that you will keep an open mind with this information, and understanding that in this month of mental health, having this information can be very helpful just to help you realign in where it is that God wants you to go, and maybe just take stock a little bit of your mental health and the mental health of others around you. And so, depression is one of those mental health topics that is oftentimes very misunderstood. Um, it's something that many people experience, including faithful behaviors like yourself. It can affect how you think, how you pray, how you feel, how you see yourself, how you behave. Oftentimes, it brings on deep sadness, fatigue, sense of hopelessness, sense of loss that simply won't go away, even with willpower or faith alone or prayer alone. Someone who struggles with depression, they're often told to get over it or that it's all in their head. Um, they may be, their character may be called into question. So it may be seen as a character flaw. They may be seen as someone who's lazy, who's weak. And sometimes people will go so far as to say that someone with depression is having a pity party. Um, I think it's very important that we look at depression from a lens of compassion, understanding, and care, not condemnation, not judgment, not criticism, because depression, we see depression in the Bible, and nowhere in the Bible did I see any of God's faithful servants, such as David or Elijah or Job. I don't remember reading anything about them being condemned. And so I think the same way depression is, or those seasons of sorrow or distress is viewed in the Bible with compassion and care, and that person is still purposeful. I would encourage us to also view depression within ourselves, but also within people that we care about from that same lens as well. Um, Many people who struggle with depression, they view themselves as being a burden on others. They believe that they will never experience joy or excitement again. And a lot of times they feel misunderstood, they feel ashamed, and a lot of times they feel very frustrated with themselves. And so, one thing that, I've come to realize is that healing from depression requires a combination of emotional support, professional help, community, and faith. Just in trusting God to be able to walk closely with you or with that person as you're going through that season of sorrow and distress. So, what is depression? Depression is when feelings of sadness, emptiness, irritability last longer than 2 weeks, and it affects a person's daily living, and it get in the way of them doing the very things that they want to do that they normally would enjoy. So you might ask, well, what causes depression? I don't like to use the word causes because there isn't any definitive or defined cause. I rather use the word vulnerabilities. And so vulnerabilities are, in my opinion, are things that would make someone more susceptible to struggle with depression or different forms of depression. So one of those would be life challenges that feels overwhelming. This could maybe include long-term unemployment or sudden unemployment, abusive relationships, isolation, prolonged or ongoing stress. It could be loss of a loved one. It could be the ending of a relationship. It could be maybe just even having a baby or retiring or needing to change your home right away. So it could be any kind of sudden life transition or even long-term life transition. It could be also just, even just living in poverty, neglect, strained relationship, those are things that that can lead to someone struggling with depression, especially if they don't have the necessary resources or support or coping strategies to be able to help them to get through those difficult moments. Another vulnerability would be changes in the brain. And that could be due to long-term stress. It could be due to chemical imbalance that affects a person's mood or motivation level. A third vulnerability would be personal factors such as family history. Even though genetics does play a role and does increase a person's risk, 1 plus 1 does not equal 2. So even if depression is in your family or in your bloodline, it doesn't mean that it doesn't guarantee you that you will get depression. It increases your susceptibility to experiencing depression, but it doesn't guarantee it. And so family history is oftentimes something that is considered. Another part in terms of personal factor would be personality. So someone who tends to have low self-esteem, who worries a lot, someone who's a perfectionist, sensitive to feedback, very highly self-critical or very negative, and they tend to be very pessimistic. These people tend to see the worst in things, very glass empty. And so with depression comes a lot of negative thinking, negative thought. And so if your personality is tend to be more critical or negative, then that increases your susceptibility because it doesn't allow the person the opportunity to celebrate their accomplishments or to be optimistic or see the glass half full. Another factor could be maybe living with a medical condition like chronic pain, chronic condition, and also just drugs or alcohol use could also either lead to depression or could result from depression. And so, in terms of vulnerabilities, we talk about changes in the brain, personal factors such as family history, personality, medical illness, but also just life challenges or life transitions that a person might be experiencing. In terms of symptoms, I would say the average person who doesn't live with depression, their mindset, you can find a balance of negative and positive thoughts that help them to feel and experience sadness and joy, successes and failures, compliments, criticism. That will help them just to be able to manage or tolerate any kind of distress. When it comes to recognizing if you do struggle with depression or if someone is struggling with depression, typically what is required is that the symptoms last at least 2 weeks. And so in terms of symptoms that, someone struggling with depression might see in their body, they may experience some or all of these. They may experience headaches, changes in appetite, either they have less appetite or they may overeat. They may constantly feel tired, body aches and pains that are unexplainable. Their immune system might weaken. Either they sleep too much or not sleep enough. And some clients have said that depression feels in their body as if they're surrounded by a thick, black, unrelenting fog or cloud in their head. And so once again, you could experience some of these or all of these. We tend not to look at these as symptoms as very much black and white. Either you have them or don't. There's very much in a gray zone. And one symptom in one person doesn't necessarily mean depression, and it could mean depression for another person. And so we have to be really careful about we look at symptoms that affect us, especially in our body. It could also very much be related to non-mental health ailments as well. And so those are some of the bodily symptoms. In terms of feelings, depression, tends to make a person feel inadequate. They feel like they're not good enough. They may feel a lot of times that they're a failure. Sadness tends to be extreme. There could be anxiety or anxiousness, guilt, irritability, loneliness, this sense of emptiness, feeling numb. A lot of times, someone with depression might feel unmotivated or become very indecisive. Um, and like everything just feels really hard. Some of the thoughts, what as I mentioned before, could be more pessimistic. So having a very negative outlook. Someone may struggle with self-harm or suicide thoughts. Now, an absence of self-harm and absence of suicide thought doesn't mean the person is not depressed. So we need to be really careful about that. And someone who is struggling with self-harm and suicide doesn't necessarily mean that they have a depressive disorder. And so once again, we have to be really, really careful. In terms of thought or mindset, a person may find it very, very hard to struggle. They're struggling with concentration and focus. They may oftentimes say to themselves, I'm a failure. It's my fault. I'm not good enough. I'm worthless. No one loves me. Life is not worth living. People do better off without me. Um, I will never achieve my dreams. And so that negative mindset really can feed into the depression symptoms increasing. Some behaviors that we might see, behavioral changes, the person might start withdrawing from, activities or socialization. They may be spending less time with friends and family. They may be withdrawing from activities that they used to love and used to enjoy. So they may not be going out at all or very, very little. They may experience a decrease or interest in sex. They may have difficulty finishing or even starting the smallest of tasks, and even keeping up with their daily responsibilities. And so they may also be eating more, sleeping less, using more and more alcohol and drugs. And so those are some of the body, the feelings, thoughts, and behavioral symptoms that we might see with someone who struggles with depression. Now, there are a lot of depressive or depression disorders. Once again, just because you might experience one of these things does not mean that you have a disorder. We all have mental health, and our mental health determines how well we're doing or how poor we might be doing in terms of our well-being. And so you can experience depression symptoms and not have a disorder. Okay. And so I'm going to go through briefly the 5, I would say, most common depressive disorders that a person might be diagnosed with. Once again, this is not a chat GPT or Google doctor type diagnosis or a friend diagnosing your self-diagnosis. I would recommend, if you do want a diagnosis, that you consult a psychiatrist, psychologist, or your general practitioner, your physician. And so those people are qualified to give you a diagnosis and to make recommendations. And so please do not try to self-diagnose when I do talk about these. So the first depressive disorder is what we call major depressive disorder, or MDD for short. Someone who's struggling with MDD, they're feeling very sad, empty, hopeless most days, and it tends to make everyday life very, very hard and challenging. Usually, they would feel these symptoms at least 2 weeks. They have little to no energy, no interest in things or people that they love. Getting out of bed feels extremely overwhelming and impossible, and small tasks feel impossible to start or complete. And so those would be a very simplified way of me to explain MDD. The second one would be what we call persistent depressive disorder, or dysthymia. This depression is less intense than the MDD that I just mentioned. However, it's more long lasting. And so a person who's experiencing this might experience low mood most days, but instead of just a few days, it could be for years. Instead of a few weeks, it could be for years. And so even though it's not as intense as MDD, it tends to last and be around a lot longer in terms of depressive disorder. For this one, once again, they may feel low mood, extreme sadness, and unmotivated. And when you speak to someone with this type of depression, they honestly can't even remember a time when they did not experience depression. And so that's just to show you how long a person might be experiencing depression. The intensity can go up and down once again. And so, but it's just been such a long time in their life. It's very difficult for them to see their identity separate from depression. And so a lot of times people might refer to themselves as, I'm depressed, I'm a depressed person, because it's been so ingrained in them and so a part of their identity that it's how they function in society. A third one, which is one that's not talked about very much, but it's becoming more and more, I guess, talked about. This is particularly for women. It's one that we call premenstrual dysphoric disorder, or PDD. This is when women experience severe premenstrual mood changes that significantly impact their emotions, their relationships, and daily life. This usually happens about a week before their period start, and they may experience really intense irritation, sadness, anger, hopelessness, and the symptoms usually disappear or they decrease once the female's period starts. And so once again, this one, there's a lot bit more stigma around it, where there is this belief that a lot of women are faking it, a lot of women or making excuses for being irritable and being in a bad mood, but this is an actual disorder that more and more a lot of women are actually being diagnosed with, and some women do require medication because the symptoms are so intense. And so once again, we have to be careful of language and not minimizing someone's experience. The fourth one would be SAD, so seasonal affective disorder. I think this is one in Canada where, oftentimes we hear people talk about a lot. This is a depression that comes and goes with the seasons. Most often it starts in the fall or winter when there's less sunlight or daylight. And so the person may feel more exhaustion, they may withdraw, they may feel sad during those long winter months. But they tend to feel a lot better once spring comes around. And so SAD is definitely something I would say a lot of Canadians or people who live in the colder climates for long periods of the year might experience. And in fact, in terms of mental health in our services, I would say during the winter seasons and fall seasons, our services tends to be more a higher demand for mental health services during those seasons. And the fifth one that I want to talk about is postpartum depression. And so this is ongoing sadness or emptiness after childbirth that lasts longer or feels more intense than the typical baby blues. And so this, once again, this could also very much be misdiagnosed for a lot of women are struggling with postpartum depression, and it's very minimized down to baby blues. And so without the proper support, it could really actually get worse. And so this is where the mom may feel disconnected, guilty, inadequate, numb, and really not feel like herself for several months. And so those are 5, I would say, of the most commonly diagnosed depressive disorders. Now, you may ask, what do I do? What do I do? So there are different options. Of course, we know that there's therapy. You can, with or without a diagnosis, the first thing is that you can seek support. Sometimes when you're struggling with depression, your family really try to support, your loved one really try to support you to pull you out of that depressive state. And so there can be a lot of feelings of guilt or shame. It can reinforce the person who's depressed belief that they're a burden on loved ones. It could increase a lot of impatience by loved ones. And so even though there's space for loved ones or people who care about you to be able to support you through this journey, which I highly encourage, sometimes getting a professional involved is one of the best options that you can have. Now, that could mean you can either see a therapist, excuse me, you can either see a therapist for psychotherapy or counseling, or some people feel that with certain lifestyle changes and medication, they'll also be able to manage their depression symptoms. For other people, it's a combination of both. They can either do we call that pharmacological therapy, so it's medication and psychotherapy. And so professional, depending on where your depressive symptoms are, the intensity or frequency, or how long you've been struggling, more professional formal support may be what you need. So that would be my first suggestion is, is that something that you need? Maybe you need to talk to your family doctor or visit a walk-in clinic to see if that is something that could be recommended. And there are various services that could be done privately. There are community-based programs. There are also crisis lines that you can access. There are free services that you can access in the community, and some are paid. And so professional support is one of those options that's available to you if that's something that's of interest to you. A second way of managing depression is what I call check yourself. Now, that's twofold. The first part would be self-awareness. This is where you have to be present and take stock of, notice what's happening in your mind, with your feelings, in your body, in your daily life. Do you notice that of late and for a while, if you've been struggling to function properly? Do you notice that some of these symptoms? So it's about building that awareness, and it's going to require you to stop and really do a quick scan of how you're doing emotionally. What's your mindset? What are your thought pattern like? What are your actions like? Have you noticed any changes in yourself or loved ones? And so checking yourself is a self-awareness component. The second component is what I call being accountable. And so this is where by checking yourself, it's really about saying, admit that you're not fine, right? It's that you don't get close to healing or managing your symptoms if you don't face them. Pretending that you're not stressed, pretending that the symptoms are not there won't make them go away. It actually will make them worse. Think of almost like a closet. When you have guests coming over, this is not most of you, of course, you've got guests coming over and you try to stuff everything in the closet and you keep stuffing them in the closet, stuffing them. Eventually, everything is going to burst open. It's very much like your symptoms. If you keep denying them or ignoring them, eventually life will force you to notice them. And by that point, your symptoms may be so severe that it may develop into a disorder. And so when I say check yourself and be accountable, it's really be honest and admit that you're not okay. Because if you're not careful, depression will make you start believing and convincing you that you're fine, that you can live with the depression, and that you're actually okay. I want you to consider Psalm 34:18 that said, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. He rescues those whose spirits are crushed." Pretending to be fine and denying the existence of the depression doesn't invite God into your situation. He will not force his way into your situation. And sometimes, even though praying is fine, it still requires action on your part and your participation, sometimes more than praying. And so there's nothing wrong with praying while you're checking yourself, but it requires you to be an active participant in your life. And so your honesty really opens the door to receive God's comfort and guidance on how to deal with your depression. Because the way that you deal with your depression may require a different step than someone else's plan in terms of that. And so my second thing would be check yourself. The third one would be what I call opposite action. So sometimes, I would say that as Christians, right, we're called to take action before we feel ready. And so opposite action is a practical skill that helps people to move forward even when they don't feel like it or see the benefit of it. So when someone is feeling depressed, the urge is oftentimes to withdraw, stay in bed, avoid people, stop your activities, things that matter to you. So opposite action means you're intentionally doing the opposite of what the depression is telling you to do, especially when those urges are keeping you stuck, keeping you in negativity. This is not forced positivity. It's about taking small, realistic, manageable steps And so if depression says, stay isolated, don't talk to anyone, the opposite action would be reach out to someone safe, attend a fellowship, go walk in the park, go walk your dog, call a friend. If depression says, stay in bed all day, get up, take a shower, sit in another room. So it's about taking those small intentional opposite action from what depression is trying to make you do. I think the scripture, what is it? 2 Corinthians 5:7 that says, we walk by faith, not by sight. A lot of time with depression, we wait to feel better before we actually take steps. This is going to be one of those steps where opposite action is going to require you to step out in faith. You're not going to be able to see the changes, but it's to step out in faith, take that one small step forward, trusting that God is present with you in the process, even when you don't feel better, even when you don't see those changes. And so that would be one of the steps that I would encourage you to take. Another step that I would encourage you to take would be to take care of your body. This means looking after your mind, your body, your soul. This can really help to improve your mental health and your well-being, whether it's about trying to eat healthier. We all can do that. I know I certainly can. Watch our energy levels. We can, be more mindful of our general health and well-being, get regular checkup, do things to boost your energy, you may have to take more vitamins, manage your stress. It could be you may need to sleep more, go for a little stroll around the block. So just try to do something better to kind of take care of your body. And so because our mind, body, our soul, spirit are very much connected, you taking care of one small part could actually very significantly make changes in other areas of your life. The last step that I would suggest is to develop a life purpose or plan. This means it's not about, a lot of times with depression, people measure whether they're doing well. Their hope is based on achievements or feeling productive. When someone is feeling depressed or experiencing depression, motivation is low. A lot of times they're not able to do or get anything done. And so it's very, very hard to recognize those things. And so developing a life purpose or plan is about taking small steps of faith and trusting God to be there with you in the process. So once again, it could be about taking care of your body. It could be about maybe doing a grounding prayer or exercise in the morning or brief scripture reading in the morning. It doesn't have to be every day. You may have to start out with once a week, depending on where your depression symptoms is. It could be about, once every other day. You might be able to do that with someone. It could be maybe watching 5 minutes of a service. Once again, it's not about how grand the step is, it's about doing something. And sometimes in order to be able to pray every day, you may have to start by 5 minutes a day. And so this is where having people around you to encourage you who understand the importance of the benefits of those small steps can be very important. Having someone around you is very much all or nothing may not be the most supportive because they will not be able to recognize those small steps as actually a large accomplishment for someone who's experiencing depression. Another part could be, I would say, you may end your day in reflection. Notice one thing that aligns with your faith. It could maybe be practice honesty. Name how you're really doing to God. It could really be about just asking God to reveal the next step to you. It could be about texting someone. And so part of living life on purpose, like I said, it's not always about accomplishments or achievements or checking off the box. Sometimes it's about process. And Pastor has talked about that before, that God is a God of process. It's not always about the end result, in my opinion. Sometimes it's the journey and what do you learn, what do you do, how do you heal through that process. And so developing a life purpose or plan can be very, very helpful for someone who's struggling with depression. And so I know I gave you guys a lot of information today, and that's just a really small part of it. But what I really want you to understand is that depression isn't something to be ashamed of. It's not something to condemn yourself about. It's something that I would say most people will experience at some point in their life if they're honest with themselves. And so, you know, living in the world that we do, it's impossible that people are not going to experience some level of mental health struggle at some point in their life. And so, looking at that and normalizing that mental health struggle is a normal part of people's existence at some point because people go through distress. I think it's something for us to be able to demystify a lot of times what depression is and to really be able to walk with someone or even allow someone to walk with you through this. And so, as always, if you have any questions, I'm available. I'd be more than happy to support you with this. If this is a topic that you'd like to know more about, or maybe for us to put on a workshop or something about, please let me know. Let pastor, let another leader in the counseling ministry know. And once again, if you do need some support, I would really encourage you to either reach out to myself or Reverend Lorraine or Pastor Sister Natalie or any of the leaders in the church to be able to support you through this. And our number is on the screen, our email is on the screen, and also there are different crisis lines around the city, like the Distress Center, that could be really, really helpful if you do need that support. And everything is confidential. And so, once again, what you share with us, we're not going to be sharing. Pastor's not going to preach about it. We do keep what you talk about in confidence. It's about helping walking alongside with you. And it's not about being nosy or wanting to know your business. And so we encourage you that if you are concerned that you're struggling with depression or that someone you know is struggling with depression, reach out to one of us, reach out to a professional like your family physician who you might be involved with. And, we've been more than happy to support you. And so, as always, I wish everyone a happy mental health month, happy mental health day, and blessings. And I hope that you're all doing well. And I wish you all a good day, good afternoon, good night, and good evening.